The Zambezi River Basin is the fourth largest river in Africa and empties into the Indian Ocean. There are several countries that have vested interest in the river basin and dependent upon it for daily life and survival of their countries. The countries of Angola, Botswana, Malawi, Mozambique, Zambia, Tanzania, Zambia, and Zimbabwe are all in one way or another dependent upon their fair share of the basin for things such as economic growth, power, drinking water, food, farming, tourism, etc., with Zambia and Zimbabwe being the two most dependent of the basin. Those eight countries are fighting for their pie in regards to their fair share of the basin. There was a real and clear potential for geopolitical and socio-economic conflict if management of the basin is not handled in an effective manner. The river is generally separated into three subsections, representing its different physical and biological characteristics. The coastal section, or the lower Zambezi, stretches 360 miles up as the Kahora Bassa Gorge, now flooded by the Kahora Bassa Dam. The middle Zambezi is 600 miles long in low-lying country and is divided from the upper Zambezi regions of the river by the Victoria Falls. The eight countries that are connected in or around the basin have their own national interests and national security at stake. So each country has a different dependence and purpose for the basin. So the biggest threat is making sure the basin is managed in an effective way and that every country can benefit from the benefits of the basin itself. There are several administrative organizations that are charged with overseeing the management and resources of the basin. One of those organizations is called the Zambezi River Authority, or the ZRA, which has a social contract with the society in which it's operating. As a corporate citizen, ZRA is defined as the social contract by giving back to the community in which it operates and resides. This was created by the two countries of Zambia and Zimbabwe based on the fact that they are the two main countries that depend on the basin for their hydropower. Another organization is the Zambezi Watercourse Commission, ZAMCOM. This was set up by those countries that share the basin as well. Its main objective is to promote the equitable and reasonable utilization of water resources of the Zambezi watercourse, as well as the efficient management and sustainability developed thereof. This organization was many, many years in the making and was originally started in the 1980s. And there were many negotiations and frameworks that were set up in the final agreement of the organization. The agreement itself was signed by 7 of the 8 states in 2004, but only by 2011 had the 6 required nations ratified the agreement, with Zambia still yet to sign, let alone ratify the agreement. Those are a couple of organizations on a local level that have the goal of maintaining and managing the basin. It is in the best interest of all countries involved, since the problem not only affects the main countries of the basin, but it also has a wider effect in the southern Africa region as a whole. In order to give the committees and their organizations some legitimacy, 2 things have happened to help politically and financially to make sure the ZACOM and the ZRA would be effective. In regards to the political aspect, the Southern African Development Community became the foundation and helped institute guidelines and frameworks to be used. The Southern African Development Community, known as SADC, which encompasses all of the Southern Africa countries from the Democratic Republic of Congo to South Africa and Madagascar. This is a super-regional body established for the purpose of integration, harmonization, and sustainability development for the region. SADC's charge is not simply economic, but is also concerned with sustainable use and management of natural resources of the basin, including water. These were set in place because the states that connected to the basin fully realize exactly what is at stake when it comes to the river basin. It is not a long river by international standards or a big river, but it is one of the cleanest and most important rivers in the world. It is not navigable like the Rhine or the Congo, but it supports two other larger hydroelectric power stations in the world and serves 6 southern African states. In a region where fresh water is going to be very short, the Zambezi is a system that everyone is looking at in the future and wondering how did they get access to that resource. The river basin could be one of the most wanted and needed resources, not only in the region but around the world, for survival, which makes this basin a major political hotspot for potential conflict. The biggest and most unknown variable when it comes to the potential conflict in the river basin is how will the role of climate change affect the region politically and economically. The geopolitical dimensions and military security consequences of climate change or the variability pose a severe challenge to the interstate relations of many of the surrounding states. Nonetheless, it is a direct impact on the people that is a human security aspect that are most worrying. One of these human security factors is food security, which, according to experts, will be the highly affected through the multiple impacts of climate change. 1/3 of the African population is affected by hunger, chronic malnutrition, as well as threats from food crisis, famine, agriculture, and food security. Food security will be a major factor for the survival of the states connected to the basin. Zambia and Zimbabwe are the two most dependent on the river for their respective countries because of their power is produced from the river basin. Without the rainfall and proper management of the basin, both countries will have to make concessions in order to preserve power resources. This means that this will affect their economies as well as directly affect their food security of the countries. With the Zambezi River Basin looking to be the future resource for survival, this will definitely be a spot in the eyes of the world, and those will be keeping an eye on the basin. For conflict, all you need is a stressor or several stressors and a trigger, and then all bets are off. When you're talking about climate change in southern Africa, you are talking about several weak and almost failed states. When it comes to protecting the interests of each country, the ZRA and the ZAMCOM can only do so much. But as a first line of defense for these states, the river basin, it would be in all the best interests of all the states involved to work together, because no one knows when the basin will become a prime target. This could be as a trigger for conflict as a result of the one thing that cannot be controlled, and that is climate change. With the threat of unknown climate change factor, environmental change, and other factors are variable, with countries being dependent on the purpose of the basin to function as it's supposed to function, the threat of conflict is great, with a possible trigger being something as simple as too much or too little rainfall. So how do you ensure the management of the basin? By all accounts, all the other partition countries just do their own thing and never request the help of other countries around them or those within the agreement of the two agreements. There are several things that need to take place to ensure stability and to make sure that the potential for conflict in the basin is reduced to much as minimum as possible. The first and immediate thing is that the ZAMCOM is to be reformed and ratified to current standards and policies to ensure that that is up to date and current. And that Zambia, very important, that Zambia signs a newly formed agreement. What this will do is give stability and flexibility to each of those countries that are part of the agreement to work together if necessary. Each country monitors, assesses, plans, develops, conserves, and protects water resources from that part of the river in its own territory. The utilization of water from resources developed is also done at a country level, with the little consultation and cooperation among the other states. Traditionally, rye-parchment states have not seized the opportunities for joint water resource management, except in isolated cases. If times become hard and dire, and the need for conflict arises, it would certainly be wise to have policies in place that are more modern and current than there are now. The second thing that needs to take place is the actual agreement. The ZAMCAM needs to have more structure and legitimacy by having the Southern African Development Commission to effectively manage the basin. Since the basin effectively lies within the SADC, the need for the SADC to adopt and efficiently manage the Zambezi hydraulic basin is very imperative, because the framework for the agreements is just that, a framework. So in order for those frameworks to be legitimized, the SADC really needs to go in and take total control of the management, which will give it stability. When it comes to protecting the interests of each country, the ZRA and the ZAMCAM can only do so much. But as the first line of defense for the states of the river basin, it would be in all the states' best interest to make sure that not only that the states are in agreement on the ratified agreement, but to let the SADC become the main and legal water management entity of the Zambezi River Basin.